Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and LEAP, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergen, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with Test School and Life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years of experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is how can past poor decisions affect college admissions? But first, let's meet our special guests, Susan Stone and Kristina Supler.
Susan Stone and Kristina Supler are the co-chairs of KJK's Student and Athlete Defense, dedicated to supporting students in crisis and addressing their legal needs. Recognizing the importance of legal advocacy for students, professors, and individuals with disabilities, Susan handles a wide range of matters, including special education issues, student disciplinary cases, and Title IX investigations. With extensive experience in due process complaints, 504 plans, and individualized education programs, Susan is well equipped to navigate complex educational and legal challenges. She also represents students in cases involving hazing, bullying, and social media issues. Kristina Supler has extensive experience handling complex cases involving allegations of sexual assault and has served on national defense teams representing students and executives facing prosecution both in the U.S. and internationally. Kristina is extremely adept at working with families and defending juveniles, particularly those with physical or mental disabilities who are facing legal challenges. Kristina has achieved great success protecting students and professors in campus Title IX proceedings, which has garnered her a national reputation. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to be here today.
It is a pleasure to have both of you on the show to speak about such an important topic. Before we dive into it, I'd love to learn a bit about your past and how you arrived at such a specific practice. I'm excited to meet professionals that cover these exact issues that seem to be so common with so many of the students that we worked with. Susan, can you start us off?
Absolutely. Well, I want to say that I'm a mom first. I have 3 children. My youngest is in college. The other 2 are grown. Just ask them. And I had taken 9 years off from practicing law to raise those children and learned a lot about childhood development and the mistakes students make that hold them back. And parenting. And when I found myself as a single mother, and I want to do a shout out to the single moms out there, because that is the toughest job in the universe, or single parent.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to law and I needed to A, make a living, and B, distinguish myself. I thought, what can I do that's authentic to me? So I picked a practice where being a mom was my biggest asset.
Love that. Kristina.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate for many years to work in the criminal defense realm. And then life has a funny way of bringing people together. And Susan and I, our personal lives cross paths in many ways. And I was so fortunate to meet this powerful, dynamic woman who was building a practice. And we started to have some natural synergies in the work we were doing and realized that we are both incredibly passionate about fighting for students. And one thing led to another. And here we are today in our work on behalf of students.
That's fantastic. So when we talk about past poor decisions, it is human nature to err, right? And adolescence is definitely marked by lots of lapses of judgment. So let's be specific. What kinds of past poor decisions should we be concerned about in terms of college admissions?
Students have always made mistakes. Nothing has changed. I wish this podcast is only audio, not visual, but I am holding up something called a phone. Here's the problem. It's that today, everything everyone does, good or bad, is captured on the phone. And so there's a document that memorializes our past mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't have that oopsie poopsie that someone might have had at 17 and it not follow you the rest of your life. Kristina, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And the phone, to take it even one step further, I mean, a couple of years back, this conversation, we'd be talking about social media.
Mhm.
Now, taking the phone issue a step further, we're seeing students have oopsie poopsies, as Susan referred to it, involving the use of AI and phones. And so you have these adolescents dreaming about college, and we're dealing with drug and alcohol issues, social media issues, and now academic integrity issues and AI. And so we see the gamut of it. But I think Susan's point is spot on, that often, or more often than not, let's say, the genesis of what we're dealing is stuff that starts with the phone that's captured one way or the other.
We can all agree, right? There's a degree of severity to what teens can do, right? That are poor decisions. There's a hierarchy, if you will. I guess one of the questions we have in terms of college admissions is, can criminal charges prevent someone from actually getting into college? Meaning there's no point even pursuing college admissions.
Well, I would never say there's always a point to pursue a college degree. And I never want anyone to feel like a mistake is going to define them for the rest of their life. That is a dangerous narrative for any student and can lead to severe mental health issues. So let's stay positive and not ever frame it that way. The Common App does not ask about your criminal record, part of the ban the box movement. However, many highly selective schools do ask on their applications. So you have to be honest, forthcoming, and have a good narrative as to why you've grown and learned, and it doesn't define you.
If I recall correctly, does the FAFSA have a question about criminal charges or incarceration? I can't remember.
Well, what I would say, that's a really good question, Amy. And I actually don't know that we've ever even been asked that. So
Obviously, that's farther down the line, but obviously many students are going to seek financial aid. So I just wondered if that is where sometimes in the process someone go, wait a second, I got admitted, and now I'm filling in a form and realizing my ability to access aid could be influenced. But well, let's not tackle that. But let's talk about just social misconduct, right? Like things that students do that might not even be criminal, but we could argue is just not how we would ideally want our kids to act. How can that impact college acceptance?
What we're seeing is that colleges want good community members. And if you have social media that's been reported to an admissions office that casts you in a light that you wouldn't be a good community member, for example, if you said something that's racist or sexist or, anti any protected class, you're not going to be viewed as someone who'd be a good community member.
That is such an important point, Susan, because what a lot of applicants overlook is the idea that colleges are not looking to assemble a bunch of scholars alone. They're not hoping that everyone that they invite to campus spends all of their free time in the library studying. Every admissions cycle is the creation of a community. And the staff wants to put together the most rich, diverse, interesting group of teens that they can. And character is definitely an element that is considered.
it's so important for students. Of course, they want to have the best application they can, demonstrating excellence in particular areas. But to your point, Mike, which I think is a really good one that we shouldn't gloss over, it's just be excellent in who you are and be a good member of the community. How can you contribute to the campus culture to enrich the culture, make it a more diverse, vibrant community? And for students to think about those considerations as well, aside from just grades and extracurriculars, is really important.
I've written a lot about the trite saying, if you wouldn't want your grandma seeing it, you probably shouldn't do it.
That's excellent advice that not everybody really considers in their actions.
So, what legal resources would then be available for students who might be facing these kind of hurdles to some poor decision making?
That's a great question, Amy. So when Susan and I work with families, let's start with like the big picture thing. For a juvenile who might have a criminal conviction or some sort of adjudication, that student should explore sealing or expungement for the state in which the student is located. That's like the starter. But then after that, Susan, what do we often also encourage families to think about when
I have one
there's
question about the expungement. Is there usually a term, like amount of time that has to go by before you can like request from a court something to be expunged? Or is that something someone can do immediately after they have, a decision has been rendered, let's just say?
There typically is a time period, and that varies from state to state.
Okay. So that if it's, that's the tricky part, right? If you do this in your junior year of high school, you may be in a period of time where that expungement might not be able to be requested, right?
I want to put an asterisk, though, about the whole idea of sealing and expunging, because that's a very important note asterisk to put. Let's say you're in law school and you're applying to take the bar exam in your given state. Expungement doesn't work for all purposes. So there are many instances like character and fitness committees that can get access to your record regardless of whether you've sealed and expunged. So law schools are doing a much better job now counseling students to report what they've done and provide an explanation and offer that the record has been sealed and expunged, but you still need to disclose.
Right. And the idea is there's going to be degrees. I actually know somebody who, end of college, got caught like skinny dipping and they had to go to court, right? And both these people ended up going to law school and eventually one of them to get expunged. But the idea is that like that's a different kind of criminal act, if you will, than something that could seriously impact this community that the college is making a decision whether they want to allow the student to join their community, right?
That's right, Amy. And I think no matter what your age, and if you're applying for undergrad or a graduate school program, it's important to keep in mind how can you demonstrate that you've grown and learned from a situation? Because any sort of program, big picture with professional licensure obligations, ethical parameters that guide the profession, there's likely to be some sort of situation in which disclosure might be the right path for the students. But again, it's an opportunity to demonstrate growth and maturity.
Since you're bringing that up, Kristina, this is really an important question. If a student made a misstep at some point and is putting together their college application, should students get out in front and disclose those missteps and explain their growth, or should they avoid admitting any wrongdoing until they have to?
I think that it's something that we encourage students to think about working with great consultants on. Another trite saying that we use sometimes is the cover-up can be worse than the crime, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we've gotten calls from heartbroken students. I know Susan and we had one just a week ago from a poor law student who didn't disclose something, and then out of nowhere, things unraveled quickly for that student in future opportunities.
And there was a feeling that if they had disclosed that information in some part of the application, that perhaps the penalty wouldn't have been as great, or maybe it would have just been glossed over entirely.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. There are no guarantees in life. And also, I want to do an asterisk. It depends on the institution you're applying to.
That's right,
Not
Susan.
all institutions ask about criminal history. So
Right.
You shouldn't destroy your chances if you don't have to, but you don't lie. There's a difference.
Right. And there's a difference.
No, I understand that. What I was getting more towards is we often suggest that applicants avoid revealing too much information. There are some people for whom they just want to lean on what may be perceived as a flaw and share more information than they should. And I think that a lot of experts say, like, don't reveal too much information. Don't make yourself look bad if you don't have to. That's kind of where I was going with this. Somebody might be, I think that one famous example that I've heard is a student who wanted to talk about shoplifting in her essay. And, she mentioned like, I shoplifted and, I've learned from that and I'll never do that again. But it's not a good look.
I agree. I don't think it should define your application.
That's a great way to put it, Susan. Yeah, that's great. And I'm really happy to hear that you work with consultants. Like you might advise a consultant who's working with a student to determine this. And so you are a resource in that regard.
Absolutely.
Yes, we really pride ourselves on, Susan and I are lawyers and we work as student advisors as well, but we really work to build teams of other professionals who can support our students with whatever the issue might be. So we take a look at the holistic individual and what that person's needs are.
So I guess where we're going with the conversation is what kind of steps could an applicant take to try to address any sort of past disciplinary actions?
Well, let's talk about suspension. Let's not go so extreme as criminal, because I think we're focusing on the extreme. And by and large, I'd like to think that most college applicants don't have a criminal record, but may have a suspension in school.
Mm-hmm.
If the suspension, there's a particular prompt on the sub essay for a particular school, let's say Yale asked, I just throw that out by way of example, really work with your school's guidance counselor, if you have an independent college counselor, and even, our office, we give our opinion on how to frame what you did. And I like to call it a sandwich approach. So the idea is reveal, show how you've grown, take accountability. 3 simple steps.
And that is done in a supplemental essay, that's done in an interview. That wouldn't be the primary message that a
Supplemental essay.
Supplemental
If there's
essay.
a supplemental essay that asks about prior suspension, reveal, show how you've grown, take accountability.
Great. How about a different kind of, again, we're steering clear of criminal action, which is really a much higher level of poor judgment. What about the social media scandal, the lapse of judgment that is filmed by someone else and has shown up online, and the student doesn't know if information is going to get out, and it's just something that makes them look bad and may possibly make an institution that accepts them look bad?
What we recommend is you don't need to disclose that if there's no prompt for it. There isn't going to be a prompt for that, okay?
There's not.
Take it off your social media, remove it. And sometimes you can't control that because other people, we've had those cases, have sent in information to admissions offices.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, you really have to explain it away, but we have seen acceptances get revoked.
Susan, what is your opinion of the services that offer to help applicants scrub their social media?
We don't use them ourselves.
We've heard of individuals who use services, for instance, to like bury an unflattering article that comes up on social media. And, there's pros and cons to everything. Let's just say this, it's not a permanent fix.
Fantastic. What are we not addressing, right? We're talking about a lot of the different poor decisions that, my imagination is only so rich, right? I can think of a lot of different scenarios. Are there specific instances in your histories that you can think of that we haven't covered besides, say, criminal, past school disciplinary actions, lapses of judgment that might be caught on social media? Anything else that students should think about when they're thinking about whether they've done something that could compromise their chances of admissions?
Subtle imagery. I think we don't think about the more subtle issue. Just remember, everybody Googles. So maybe we're not talking about a crime or a suspension or an overtly horrific statement that someone could make on social media. But are you portraying yourself in a light that you believe speaks well of you?
Mm-hmm.
The more gray area. Wouldn't you agree, Kristina?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Susan. And I mean, we've even had students face issues with ramifications and fallout for liking liking an image, sharing an
Right.
image. And
Mhm.
that, I mean, believe it or not, we've had some of those cases. And so I think this is all driving towards the bigger point. If we, take a step back and scan out, parents, please have conversations with your children, starting at, whenever they access social media. And obviously that can be at different ages in different households, but talk to your children about responsible social media use, what they post, what they like, what they share, because we all know once something is on the internet, it might live forever and you might lose control over how that image is disseminated and can continue on. And so really the key to all of this, you don't want to be in a situation where you're calling Susan and me in tears. And that starts early on with important conversations at home.
Careful what you text. Did we not learn this did this not play out on the national stage? I mean,
Mhm.
really, I cannot emphasize enough that text messages should be used for see you at 6 o'clock, running late, happy birthday. Assume everything you text will be public fodder. Not everything needs to be put in a text message. We don't want to talk about national security. We don't want to talk about going to war. Not a good idea. But neither should we badmouth other people. Neither should we gossip on social media. I'm talking the more subtle. Really, if I could impart one last thought, texting is for, hi, happy birthday, meet you at the mall, running late for the movie.
That's it. So teens, and I mean, really, we can expand this to just human beings,
As we
should be
saw,
careful to avoid doing anything in public, to avoid texting, to avoid emailing, anything that their grandparents, assuming their grandparents are of a good character, would disapprove of.
The
are
irony,
you
Mike, is what we're talking about here. I think these lessons hold true for people of any age, right?
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
whether you're 25, 12, or 50, I think these lessons are applicable. And let's face it, we all make, lapses in judgment at times, making comments in small groups or whatnot. But at certain periods in our life, we're more under the lens than others. And certainly, students looking to college, that is a time when you do have to be very mindful about your outward facing persona.
I want to ask one final question because, and I think it's obvious to everyone, but I'm going to ask you just to clarify. The point at which a student is admitted to a school is not then a safe harbor where they are free to do whatever they want after, correct? Is it possible that students will have their admissions revoked after admission before enrollment or even after they attend a school if they do the wrong things?
until that degree is in your hand.
That is true, right? I
That's
mean,
when
really,
you
ultimately,
breathe.
And even then,
And even
And
then,
even
we've worked
then.
on cases.
yeah. But it's true. But it's true. There are lots of things that can happen even when you're in college, right? Or accepted or show up that could still, your past sort of can come bubble back up in the future.
that's right, Amy. And I mean, now for uh, seniors heading off to college, there's all these social media platforms and pages where you post where you're going and incoming freshman groups and so on and so forth. And we have, Susan, you remember that matter we worked on? Someone was canceled before they even got to campus, and it turned into a big mess for the family. So Susan's point should not be taken lightly until you are there and the degree is in your hands.
Yes, I love that. Susan, Christina, we would love to talk with you all day about this topic. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming today.
Oh, thank you for having us. We love talking about all things kid.
If listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Look at our website, studentdefense.org. We're at Corbin Jackson Krantz, or you can just Google our names. Hopefully there's nothing we'll be embarrassed about. I'm Susan Stone and my partner's Kristina Supler.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guest on the next Test and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Test and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.